Good to go, friends.
Good morning, distinguished dignitaries, invited guests, faculty, staff, alumni, and students. I am Devanshu Chattopadhyay, a third-year journalism and mass communication student. I am delighted to welcome you on the occasion of the 12th Foundation Day of our university. Foundation Day is a celebration and commemoration of the origins of our university. The vision and values of our institution are captured in the Navrashna University anthem.
विश्वामित्र के तट पे देखो शहर सयाजी नगरी है, मां शारदा का मंदिर है, नवरचना यूनिवर्सिटी है। बनना है जो बन जाओ तुम, बात हमें बतलाती है, शिक्षण से ही स्वतंत्रता है, पाठ यही पढ़वाती है। नव नव रचना करते यहाँ पर छात्र और छात्राएं हैं, शिक्षण की खुशबू फैलाती नवनिर्मित शाखाएं हैं। प्रयोग से प्रेरित शिक्षा पर यहाँ जोर दिया जाता है, NUV का छात्र दशों दिशाओं में पर फैलाता है। निष्ठा तब और धैर्य यहाँ के शिक्षक की पहचाने हैं, शिक्षा और संशोधन से जो उन्नत राष्ट्र बनाते हैं। नवरचना नवरचना यूनिवर्सिटी, नवरचना नवरचना यूनिवर्सिटी, नवरचना नवरचना यूनिवर्सिटी, हमारी नवरचना नवरचना यूनिवर्सिटी।
That is Navrashna University. I request Srimati Tejal Amin, Chairperson, Navrashna Education Society, to share her thoughts today on the 12th Foundation Day of Navrashna University.
Very good morning and good evening to all who have joined us today to celebrate our Foundation Day. A very warm welcome to our chief guest, Mr. Harish Mehta, and our guest of honor, Dr. Krishna Sudheesh. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and giving us the benefit of your expertise, wisdom, and experience. We are indeed fortunate to have you both with us, as you represent two sectors, two very vital sectors, information technology and biomedical technology, which are critical to the future of human development, of humankind, as it were. When we were first invited by the government of Gujarat to set up Navrachna University, there was great enthusiasm and excitement amongst all of us at Navrachna Education Society. Till then, we had set up schools, leading schools across all the school boards, Indian as well as international, providing education to a vast socio-economic, cultural cross-section of society in and around Baroda, right from children, underprivileged children dwelling in slum areas, tribal children, the middle class, and the upper and the affluent class. So when we were invited to set up a university, we saw that here was a chance to take forward the ethos and philosophy of the society, which would have led to a path-breaking experiment of higher education, at least in and around Baroda, at least in Gujarat. We moved away from the conventional model of higher education and set out to chart an education model which would meet the aspirations and fulfill the educational and other requirements of young adults who would graduate from our university to set up themselves for a productive life beyond. When we look at the National Education Policy 2020, the policy document which is brought out once in a decade by the central government as a guideline for state governments, We feel very happy to see that the focus areas that Navrachna University had identified for the education design of Navrachna University have been validated in this document, which was led personally in its formulation by our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Bhai Modi. Areas of like multidisciplinary approach, flexibility in choice of credits and subjects, innovation, entrepreneurship, a hands-on project-oriented learning system, inculcating a sense of social responsibilities. These are some of the areas that Navrachna University focused on when it developed the education design for the university. Later on, in the last few years, research publications have also been emphasized, mainly through the efforts of our provost, Dr. Yagnik. As we step into the future, the pandemic times of the present have thrown up challenges, and I also see opportunities, which will transform education, as it were, a much needed transformation through new education delivery models that we see emerging around us. I'm very confident that Navrachna University, under the able leadership of our provost, our registrar, Dr. Sandeep Vasant, all our deans, our program chairs, the entire academic fraternity at Navrachna University and the staff will ensure that we continue to provide through the new models relevant and meaningful quality education to our students, research opportunities for our faculty and academic scholars, build the necessary competencies, inculcate, most importantly, good values, good universal values of integrity, honesty, spirit of social responsibility of giving back, such that they are able to contribute meaningfully, lead happy lives for the development of our nation and indeed the world. Thank you. We are here to listen to two very eminent speakers. I would not take further time and request Dr. Yagnik to take our event forward. My greetings to all our alumni who are here today and all our invited guests, faculty, academic staff of Navrachna University, members of the Board of Governors, Board of Management, Academic Council, Academic Advisory Board. My greetings on the occasion of our Foundation Day. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable insights. I invite our provost, Dr. Nilay Yagnik, to address this virtual gathering on Foundation Day 2021.
Thank you, Devanshu. Dear Mrs. Tejalben Amin, Chairperson of our Navrachna Education Society and the Navrachna University, members of the Board of Governors who are attending today, the Chief Guest, Mr. Harish Mehta, Guest of Honor, Dr. Krishna Sudheesh, who's joined us live from California, my dear faculty, dear staff, students, alumni, corporate partners, well-wishers, all of you who are watching us today, a good morning and a good evening from wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the 12th Foundation Day of Navrachna University. The ethos of our university and the basic philosophy of our university is interdisciplinariness, innovation, and a social conscience. In whatever we do, we try and see that these three things are intertwined together. From the time we met last year till today, there are several new things that have happened, and I'll just quickly go through them. If you look at our School of Environment Design and Architecture, we set up last year the Center for Heritage. And I'm so happy to inform you that just a couple of weeks back, we launched the new website of the Vad of Vadodara project. Vad stands for a banyan tree, and the city of Vadodara has got its name from the banyan tree, the Vad of Vadodara. This is an interdisciplinary project which involves, of course, the School of Environment, Design and Architecture, specifically the landscape people who are driving this project, but it also involves computer science people because there is geotagging of all the banyan trees. It also involves the School of Science and the botany people because they are experts in botany and plants. So that is one very innovative project which will have a huge social obligation as well, and a social objective as well, which is to help the city of Vadodara and get it known globally. Our School of Science has a Center for Public Health, which again we launched last year. And we organized an extremely successful conference in the very important field of trends in public health, jointly with the University of Arizona. Again, a highly interdisciplinary conference involving computer science, involving liberal studies, involving management, intellectual property, and of course, science and engineering in the very important field of architecture, in the very important field of public health. I'm so sorry. Public health also, incidentally, architecture is also very closely involved in public health because the way in which you design environment-friendly buildings is extremely important, and they too played a very important role in this conference. So it was an interdisciplinary conference, collaborative from around the world, innovative, and again a social objective. Our School of Liberal Studies, jointly with the Center for Education, Innovation and Research, published two very interesting books of an interdisciplinary nature. The first book is Dialogues Across Disciplines. This was again an interdisciplinary dialogue, an idea fest, what we call Vichar Vimarsh, involving areas of neuroscience, computer science, learning, and of course, the liberal arts. And all of that has come out in the form of a proceedings, which we launched a few months ago. We also launched another book, which is called The Songs of Life, which is a transcreation of the works of Rabindranath Tagore. And this was launched on the birthday of Tagore, which was on the 7th of May. The School of Management, again, has done some very innovative projects with an objective to the society, as well as interdisciplinary in nature. A very important consulting project in the field of supply chain management is being done right now by one of our faculty there and a team in the School of Business, which covers the area of supply chain for a large corporate. Our law program has got a very interesting project. For the very first time, we've got a grant from the government of Gujarat, Department of Law, for intellectual property. Our School of Engineering has collaborated with the Thomas J. Watson School of Engineering at Binghamton. And this particular project, this particular collaboration is going very deep now. We have conducted several programs in the field of additive manufacturing for medical applications. We have done design thinking for healthcare and such kind of cutting edge topics. Our automation lab, which we have set up recently, has a robot from a very leading German company. We also have 3D printers and we have CAD/CAM systems. So the whole integrated automation has been set up in our workshop downstairs in our university. We plan to make this available to all our students across the university, jointly with the Makerspace, the Q Lab, which has also been set up last year. For the very first time, we applied for the Student Startup Innovation Project. The government of Gujarat has set up the Student Startup Innovation Project called the SSIP, which is to fund various innovative startup ideas of students. And I'm very happy to tell you that there are 5 projects today, again in interdisciplinary areas, School of Science, as well as School of Management. They are working on new ideas, and the government, along with us, have jointly funded their startup ideas. a hugely important area, which is COVID diagnosis, is one of the projects which our students have come up with under faculty guidance from the School of Science. And our business school has come up with a very innovative shoe design. A student has come up with that. So there are 5 projects. And for the very first time, we got this grant. And I'm so happy to inform you that the government of Gujarat has ranked us A grade in this entire initiative amongst all the SSIP grantees in the state of Gujarat. This is the top 20% of the state of Gujarat. For the very first time, we applied for the Gujarat State Institutional Ranking Framework done by the government of Gujarat. And I'm so happy to inform you that 3 of our schools, the School of Architecture, the School of Management, and the School of Science, has ranked first rank in the city of Vadodara. And all these 3 schools, we applied only for these 3 schools. And all these 3 schools are in the top 10 in the state of Gujarat. And this is the very first time, and yet we've got a pretty good ranking. But all these achievements that we've done only helps us and motivates us to strive further. It's a long journey. It's a journey of excellence, which we are doing right now. And I still remember the poem that I studied in school. And I'm sure Sudhir also remembers that. Sudhir was my classmate in school 50 years ago. A poem by Longfellow. And if you remember the last paragraph of that poem, the Psalm of Life, let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Thank you so much. Today we have some wonderful speakers. Harish Mehta is our chief guest. I'm so glad he accepted our invitation. Harish Mehta, for those who know, and for those who don't know, he is one of the pioneers of the Indian IT industry. I know him for several years, and he was the one way back in the 60s, after he did his MS from Brooklyn. He came back to India, and he, along with 3 friends, started a very interesting company called Hinditron, which was one of the pioneers of the computer industry. And Hinditron brought the 2nd largest computer company in the world at that time, Digital Equipment Corporation, which is known for its classic PDP and VAC series of computers. Subsequently, the same Harish Mehta brought one of the world's leading at that time networking companies, the company which introduced local area networking, Novell, and set up a company called Onward Novell. After that, he pioneered the launch of the Association for Software and Service Companies called NASSCOM. And he, along with one of his persons who he himself had identified, Devang Mehta, they helped put India on the global map of IT. And in fact, today, when we say India is IT, it is primarily the efforts of Harish Mehta. Thank you so much for joining us today, Harish Bhai. We also have the guest of honor, Dr. Krishna Sudheesh. Dr. Sudheesh is the Global Vice President of Abbott Vascular, and he is based in California, in Santa Clara, and he works on cutting-edge technologies in the field of stent. He's a leading world-renowned cardiologist. He's also a consulting professor at Stanford University, and he's a TED-Ed speaker. Some of you may have seen his TED-Ed talks on heart attacks, blood pressure, and so on. So thank you so much, Sudhir, for joining us today, and we look forward to your talk today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and Devanshu, please take it forward.
Thank you, Dr. Yagnik, for your words championing the spirit and values of Navrishna University on today's occasion. The first speaker for today is our chief guest, Mr. Harish Mehta. Mr. Harish Mehta is the founder and executive chairman of Onward Technologies Limited. He is the first elected chairman of National Association of Software and Service Companies, NASSCOM, the premier association of the Indian IT industry. Mr. Mehta is also the director of the Indian Angel Network and the convener of President's Council for the Indus Entrepreneurs Mumbai. Mr. Mehta has undertaken numerous initiatives, including Mumbai Police for Cyber Safety Awareness. This led to the establishment of cyber labs across the country and formation of Data Security Council of India, a NASSCOM initiative. In the early 90s, as managing trustee of the Trust to Promote Advanced Technologies in India, he led the advent of exciting new technologies like very large databases, visual computing, and artificial intelligence, which are now mainstream. He continues to be deeply involved in areas of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine learning, blockchain, and cryptocurrency. Mr. Mehta received the honor of CEO of the Year during an international seminar organized by NMIMS, the Tata HRD Network, and World HRD Congress in 1994. He was conferred Lifetime Achievement Award for HR Excellence by Deccan Herald in 2004. In 2017, Mr. Mehta was honored by Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his 25 years of exemplary contribution to NASSCOM. He was also honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award by IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry in 2018. On behalf of Navrachna University, I'm honored to welcome you, sir. I request you to commence with your talk on this auspicious occasion.
Thank you, Dr. Yajnik and Devanshu for kind words of introduction. Good morning, friends. Good morning, Tejalben. Good morning, trustees. Good morning, students, professors, deans, whoever is present today. So during this COVID time, we see the devastating impact on Indian economy. And we see that innovation-driven India or innovation-driven techno-entrepreneurs will take the India out of the current challenges and make it into a developed nation. And then Navrachna as a word signifies innovation, creativity, and the interdisciplinary is absolutely the reason, I would say, the focus for techno-entrepreneurs going forward. So I'm looking forward to Navrachna creating or building a strong foundation for the entrepreneurs that comes out of your university. Talking about Baroda or Vadodara, Devang name definitely comes the right away. Devang was born just 50 kilometers away from Barodara at a place called Umred. Now, many of you may not know, if I ask you to raise your hand, how many of you know Devang Mehta? I suspect that 50% won't know who Devang Mehta is. So let me introduce Devang differently. Dr. Sumantra Gosal from London School of Economics, who is no longer, at one of our NASSCOM conference about 10 years back, he said that 1,000 years of downward spiral of India, that is from Mughal Raj to British Raj was arrested by the IT industry of India. And NASSCOM was the driving force in making that happen. And Devang was the sutradhar in those early 10 years of NASSCOM. That was, and I can give one or two examples of how he used to work. As an industry, we decided we would like to have a very stringent Copyright Act. Software piracy was rampant, apart from the film, movie piracy and whatnot. So we, in order to build India Inc. brand, we wanted a very stringent Copyright Act. Because we Indians would believe in right to copy and not in the Copyright Act. Now, this was a big change. Even I remember that when we approached the government, some of the officers would say, Mahabharata, Gita, whatever, Vedas, we have given it free. Why should we pay for royalty to the software products from outside India? Some of them even said that everyone who invaded India has looted India. So why should, this is our opportunity to loot India or loot the foreign companies' products. So why should we strengthen the Copyright Act? So at that time, Devang gave presentations to 15 political parties. So when the Copyright Act comes up for discussion and approval at Lok Sabha, all political parties support. and it went through smoothly. So that was his contribution in terms of his style of working that made it happen. Tejal Ben talked about the values. Now, the way I recruited Devang, frankly, was I knew him before, and in one of the meeting, there were tears in his eyes. So I said, Devang, oh, what's wrong? I mean, why these tears in your eyes? So he said, Apro desh kyare sudhar se. So he was reading some article in the newspaper about corruption, something scam and whatnot. So that appealed to me. I registered that. So when we were looking for someone to run NASCOM, I remembered Devang. Then I asked Devang, would you like to join NASCOM? Because to me, that patriotism that came out was very appealing apart from his other qualifications. And that value he inculcated from the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan school, which he studied at Delhi. So these values are so critical as the students go up into the real life and how they use their passion to achieve those objectives. And after Devang joined NASCOM, industry was about, say, $20 million and 150,000 employees. The day he passed away, let's say the year he passed away, industry was at $106 billion. And today the industry is at $200 billion. So that's the sort of contribution that Devang made. Great to have from Baroda, this individual, and talk to you in Baroda and remember him about few of his achievements that he did. Dr. Yadnik asked me 3-4 things to do in my expression of the views. One was where IT industry is today, where the potential of IT industry, the role of NASCOM in the past and role of NASCOM in the future, and opportunities for technology or tech-driven entrepreneurship. So I'll try to spend few minutes on each of these category. I may run out of time, so please stop me when I run out of time. Just raise a hand, so I'll stop at that point in time. So starting with where IT industry is today. I can give some numbers, $200 billion in terms of exports, more than $100 billion on net foreign exchange. Now, what does that mean? Today, our net import of smartphones, the foreign exchange required is $52 billion. So in a sense, that export earnings of this industry is funding the smartphone import. And similarly, if you look at the cumulative effect of the last 15 years, the foreign exchange that the industry has earned has paid for number of activities which capex and whatnot for the other industries' growth. Today, industry employs 5 million software engineers. These are high disposable income jobs. Each person, on an average, creates 4 to 5 additional jobs in the society. And these are also, again, many of them are high-end jobs. And you see from real estate to airports, so everything has changed dramatically where the IT industry hubs are. And so if you look at the numbers, 5 million employees employing creating 5 more jobs, it's talking about 25 million people. And 25 million, if you take 4 per family, you talk about 100 million people, Indians, are impacted by the IT industry today. If you look at the software side, today IIT Bombay Gardner's son has got a job in IT industry. And he got the job because what he knows, not whom he knows. That meritocracy was brought in by our industry. And that has made a huge impact in terms of creating confidence in the tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. People realize that, hey, I just have to know the subject well and I'll get a job in the IT industry. In the process today, our industry employs 37% women employees. From the 5 million, 37% are women employees. Even when we recruit freshers, 50% are women today. Massive change. Industry does. When they recruit a person, you literally look at the technical skills or the soft skills the individual has. It has nothing to do with whom you know. And that's a massive cultural change that industry is bringing into the country. Now, I can go on in terms of number of benefits that industry has brought in, but I'll come back to how this change was brought in. Let's say, how did industry grew 30 times in 30 years to this level? when India was known as a snake charmers country or a third world country, how did it change? And why NASSCOM could do it, and maybe, and I'll try to differentiate between NASSCOM and other associations. Probably those were the differentiators that made an impact for industry to grow. Like we talked about, say, Devang, for example. When we recruited Devang, he was 29 years old. He was a young person. We saw his passion. We took risk on him. We said our industry is built on talent and we must pay for the talent and we must allow the talent to drive NASSCOM. So instead of recruiting a retired army officer or nothing wrong with them, it's just that we wanted the right talent to lead NASSCOM. If you look at like one of the very key value which we started inculcated from beginning is no personal agenda at the association level discussion. You have to forget about your position, your company, your industry, your salary and whatnot, a number of people reporting to you. When you come and discuss at the industry platform level, it has to be India level and no personal agenda. I'll tell you one story here. About 10, 12 years back, PMO took a delegation to Russia. Now, there were about 350 business people in the audience where we had to give a presentation about our capabilities. There was pharma industry also there and IT industry was there, but there were two potentials, export activities. So Som Mittal, who was the president of NASSCOM, normally he would give the presentation. But then Som looked around and he saw Harish Mehta, who was then chairman of NASSCOM and also chairman of Accenture India. He should give the presentation. When Harish looked around, he saw N. Chandra, and in those days, the CEO of TCS, he's also part of the group. He said the largest IT company is here, so their CEO should give a presentation. So everybody agreed, and they approached Chandra. Chandra, would you give a presentation? So without blinking, you can say, he said, yes, I will. But then Som said, but there is one caveat. He said, what? In this presentation, you will have to speak about 4 of your competitors' case studies. So of course I'll do. It was amazing to see. I'm speaking on behalf of India. So I will say, and he did speak about his 4 competitors' case studies in his presentation. Now, seeing this kind of environment, I remember another story where John McCarthy, CEO of Foresters Consulting, he used to come to India regularly and he was watching us and attending our seminars, giving presentations and whatnot. He was invited by the Chinese government to come up with a master plan to how to compete with India in IT services. And John told them, sorry, you can't compete with China or with India until you create NASSCOM equivalent organization. They said, why do you say that? He said, I have not seen anywhere in the world fiercely competitive companies, be it TCS, Accenture, IBM, Infosys, Wipro, all sitting around a table and talking at India level. And so that is where the industry differentiates. And when you look at it from that perspective, NASSCOM, for example, worked with Mr. Vittal to come up with the STPI scheme. Now, STPI scheme was an all-inclusive scheme. It was not only meant for large companies. It allowed new companies to take birth. It allowed existing companies to take birth. And it allowed the new companies to flourish in a city instead of going 100 miles away to an export zone. So there are a number of things that I would say NASSCOM did, which made an inclusive growth. I'll give another story. There was a time when IBM and Coca-Cola or other asked that they left India because in government regulation was that they cannot have more than 40% equity. But after our industry grew very well, the same Fortune 2000 customers said, we would like to set up a back office operations in India. Now, back office meaning but we want 100% ownership because these are our internal operations, these are confidential operations, and we need to manage it ourselves. So that was and we completely changed in the mindset for everybody. And plus to us as an industry, if you allow MNCs to come in, we had a fear that they'll take away our best people. We may lose our market. So there are many fears we had about allowing MNCs to come in. And we kept debating this issue. Should we allow or should we not allow? On the other hand, we realized that if we open it up, it will build an Indian brand. And if they're happy with the back office operation, they'll give us more work in other areas. So we could not decide, frankly, for a while. At some point, we decided that somebody said, whoever develops human capital of India is us, and who doesn't is not us. Now that clicked. I said, yeah, these back office operations will develop human capital of India. And there would be a synergy. We will learn quality processes from them, their ways of doing things like Six Sigma and whatnot. So it is good to have such. So we prepared our report and we went and met Dr. Manmohan Singh at that time. And we said we would like to allow 100% ownership to these back office operations. So one of the officers said, देश को बेचने आए हो क्या? ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी तो अभी गई, अभी तुम दूसरी नई ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी ले आ रहे हो. Or somebody once said, "Ab kiske dalal ho?" Nobody would trust us. But we were ready with data, facts, and Dr. Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao, as at that time Prime Minister, agreed to allow 100% ownership. Today, that particular segment employs 1.2 million software engineers. There are 1,400 R&D centers in India, in engineering and in many other areas. And many of them have started doing, you can say, high-tech development work in India. And that segment is one of the fastest growing segment in India. So that is what somebody who would have just killed it by saying, "Tum kiske dalal ho," has become the major segment of our industry going forward. Now, let me shift to where we are going. Now, again, we believe, us in the technology world, that it is technology that has saved the world against COVID-19. If you see the impact of technology in the last year and a half, vaccine development has reduced dramatically, vaccine delivery has reduced dramatically. All of us were use Zoom to social media, kept us connected, or the Netflixes of the world entertained us. Online video, they kept the entire whole billions of people connected in spite of the COVID and its impact, and we were boxed in a home. Similarly, if you see government, instead of, as our Prime Minister said the other day, that instead of managing through files, COVID was managed through real-time online dashboards. Every city, every state has this dashboard on which they were running it. So that is the impact of this digitalization. And it has brought in massive change in the mindset of people, not only in India, around the world. And that is a huge opportunity for IT industry going forward. There is a huge shortage of all the advanced skills needed for this digital transformation: artificial intelligence, analytics, 3D, robotics, whatnot. You name all these technologies, and there's a huge shortage of these skills. And who has the, we can say, second largest software manpower in the world? India. So we see Indian IT industry playing a significant role. So if we are at $200 million, we are now looking at $350 billion. And also, it's not only digitalization, we only have 15% of the total global outsourcing market. So there's room to grow there also. And the third area where industry again would grow is the domestic industry. Now, other day I was a judge at Indian Merchants Chambers at Digital Awards for companies in India using technologies well. And I was surprised that one company, I just don't remember the name, but let's say I call it Patel Traders. They were shortlisted. I said, what this company has to do with the advanced technologies? And they were in logistics and shipping, and they had put GPS on every truck they had. They had put use blockchain, artificial intelligence. I was amazed the way the Indian corporates are also, I would say, digitalizing. So that again is a huge opportunity for the IT industry to solve Indian customers' problems. If we solve the problems of Fortune 2000 companies around the world, why not in India? So we see good, excellent opportunity for our industry going forward. Now, let me spend a few minutes about the technology opportunities or technology-driven entrepreneurship opportunities going forward. So these advanced technologies are also exponential in nature. Of course, many of you would know it, but the performance is improving either in double digit or in triple digits every year. Be it artificial intelligence, be it machine learning, be it 3D robot, name it, any technology where one is, of course, they're all software driven. So every year you keep adding new additional software pieces or features on that, which increases the performance. And the same software also improves the hardware performance. Now, we have Dr. Sudheesh coming in next. Again, he will also, I'm sure, tell us about in the bio area, how the IT technologies have become all pervasive now. The research has been accelerated 10 times compared to what was, say, 5 years back using these technologies. So that is the exponential power of these technologies. And on top of it, they're converging. So as Doctor, you talked about Vadodara's word to be numbered and whatnot. I mean, again, you can see multiple technologies are there. But why is it so possible now to converge them together? So it's the nature of these exponential technologies. When they converge, you can do multiple combinations to solve any problem. So if you see Elon Musk having a SpaceX saying that I want to have a reusable rocket, he could do that. And there's nothing that students coming out of Navrachna or any other engineering college cannot dream that. They too can dream such areas or such, I would say, world-changing thoughts and go after it. And I can tell you in India, today the angel money, the VC money is available for such high-risk projects. To give an example, this Nazara went public a month ago. It was a loss-making startup at that time. And they raised 500 crores. You heard Pharmeasy buying Thyrocare for 4,000 crores, a 20-year-old company. You heard Baiju buying Akash, 30-year-old company. So the sea change happening. The money is now going to be available, we believe very strongly, for such high risk but high reward projects. We have seen companies now in Hyderabad-based company in the space tech, manufacturing or with the ambition of manufacturing lowest cost satellites. So you will see a wide range of such new ventures coming up in India to solve India's problems. And we believe very strongly that healthcare will be replaced by health tech, space will be replaced by space tech, agriculture will be replaced by agri-tech, education will be replaced by ed tech, and so on and so forth. If the technology will be all pervasive and they will enter every possible area to bring in a transformational change in those applications. Look at the UPI, for example. I mean, a simple, you can say, protocol for payment transactions hardly had a turnover of few crores 2 years back. Today, in March, the turnover of transaction that happened using UPI was 5 lakh crore. And 2.2 billion transactions were transacted using UPI. So that's the power of, we can say, exponential power of this technology. Once it takes off, it really takes off. So we, as an industry, feel very comfortable that there is a massive potential for these startups going forward. We already have 58 unicorns. We are seeing 150 unicorns will happen in the next, by say 2025. And the impact it will have, on the economy could be as high as by 2030, $10 trillion. So again, so that's those numbers. But the point is that the startups will change India. And I think all the necessary ingredients are coming in place. And of course, NASSCOM would be very proactively working the entire ecosystem to see that reduce the friction for this entrepreneurship model to come up. So in overall, I would say in summary that industry is going from on one side, $200 billion to $350 billion. There also, for example, Dr. Piyush Goyal, the Commerce Minister, he met us and he said, what can the government, give us the three things the government can do for your industry to go to $500 billion by 2030. So you can see the political will also is there to bring in a change for this industry to grow. So overall, I would say that there's a new flywheel in India is building up. This flywheel has 5 million software engineers, has talent focusing on deep tech. By the way, on the deep tech, I just comment for you, Dr. Yadnik, that when I looked at your website, you had somewhere you had talked about T-based development.
Yes.
The deep tech will require pi-based development.
Okay.
You will require two areas, two pillars, two domain areas you will have to be really good at. So one could be technology domain and one could be your business domain. But that is the need for the deep tech going forward. So you may want to look into it, see whether it's applicable to your university or not.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. We see entrepreneurs beaming with energy, enthusiasm, confidence to take on the world. So, and the money is coming in. So you can say that we see new India emerging. India as a smart nation taking birth, or India as a digital nation taking birth. We're very, very happy to see the kind of changes that we see around us. I wish I was as young as many of the students in your university. I know it's an uncertain world out there, but also it is equally exciting that great opportunities await all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for your expert insights in the worlds of technology, finance, and stories that inspire integrity and hope in all of us. Our second speaker is our guest of honor, Dr. Krishna Sudheesh. Dr. Krishna Sudheesh is a physician and cardiologist with 30 years experience in cardiovascular medicine and research. He is currently Divisional Vice President of Medical Affairs and Product Performance at Abbott Vascular, Santa Clara, California. He has an MD from the University of Madras, a PhD from the Monash University, Melbourne, and a cardiovascular fellowship from the University of California, San Francisco. His industry career spans a broad range of experience in drug and device development. Dr. Sudheesh is a visiting professor and scholar at the Center for Cardiovascular Technology, Stanford University. He is a visiting professor in the Graduate Bioengineering program at the University of California, Berkeley. He has published over 180 academic papers in peer-reviewed journals and has a dozen chapters in medical textbooks, and has served on the editorial board of the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. He is a fellow of the Australian College of Physicians, the American College of Cardiology, and the Society of Cardiac Angiography and Interventions. He has also authored several TED-Ed videos and has also published a fantasy fiction novel. It is a privilege to have you here, sir. May I please invite you to deliver your talk on today's auspicious occasion.
Thank you very much, Devanshu, for that very generous introduction. First of all, I want to thank my dear friend, Nilay, whom I've known for 50 plus years now, for inviting me to give this lecture. Nilay and I go back a long way. We were together on the elocution and speech and debate team at Don Bosco in Chennai, and we spent a lot of time together at intercollegiate functions and so on, and I got to know him really, really well. You've got one of the smartest guys as your provost, I can tell you that. And importantly, I'd like to wish him a very happy birthday.
Oh,
Happy Nilay.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
So thanks again. And I want to also thank Srimati Tejal Amin for the invitation. And thank you, Harish, for an excellent lecture. I really enjoyed that. I am by no means an IT expert. I learned a lot from what you just said. So good evening, everybody. Good evening to the faculty of Navrachna University. Good evening to all the students. Good evening to everyone listening. Nilay has given me a topic that's one of my favorites, and that is innovation, specifically innovation in the Silicon Valley. I'm just going to share my screen here. It's a topic dear to my heart because I have spent the last 30 odd years in the Silicon Valley. I came to this part of the world in 1990, and I've pretty much been here most of my working life, save for a few years in Australia, where I did some of my training. And I've learned a lot from being here. This is a very special part of the world. Incidentally, a part of the world with a very high population of people of Indian origin. And that's not by accident, I think. Wherever you see rapid development, rapid growth, you see Indians there for some reason, right? So we all know that's a fact. But hanging around in this part of the world for 30 years, I've come to learn a few things. And I'm often asked by people across the world when I travel and lecture, what is the secret sauce of the Silicon Valley? What makes it tick? Why is it that we have Apple and Google and Facebook and Oracle and all these, Tesla, all these companies starting here and having a global impact from their inception in this part of the world? In the biotech world as well, we have companies like Genentech, my own company, Abbott, and a huge range of startups. It is said that there are about 1,000 startups, at least, probably even more, from Santa Rosa to San Jose, that sort of length of the Silicon Valley. So what is it that actually makes this part of the world tick? So in the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll attempt to give you my explanation as to what makes this part of the world unique. First of all, it is a unique confluence of three things. You know, you have Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati, right? A confluence of three rivers. So here we have a confluence of academia, industry, and capital. And in order to actually make things work in terms of innovation, it is my belief now that you need all three. The best ideas come out of academia, because in academia, you're free to do your thinking. You can sit back, you can envisage a master's project, envisage a PhD project, work with smart people to get it going, think about things that nobody else is thinking about, because the world outside the university campus is busy with day-to-day activities. On university campuses, we have the luxury of actually thinking. There is an old joke that, when you went to Edinburgh University, they would ask you, what did your teachers teach you? When you came out of London University, they would ask you, what do you know? But when you came out of Oxford or Cambridge, they would ask, what do you think, right? So thinking is kind of the pinnacle of the academic career, and that's what we need. We need students who are thinking, students who are prepared to actually break with dogma and move things forward. So that's what academia produces. Then you need industry. Srimati Amin said this at the start, that your university has a tradition of collaborating with industry. I think that's a very good tradition. We have the same thing in the Silicon Valley, a close association between academia and industry. And the third requirement is, of course, capital. You need funding, you need finance. We have a street here called Sand Hill Road, fairly close to Stanford, where there's billions of dollars in venture capital money. There are people who've made their money from either the finance sector or the IT sector or the biotech sector, and now reinvest this capital in new concepts and new ideas. When you go and make a presentation to a group of venture capitalists, they are often very successful people sitting on the other side of the table. So not only are they doling out the capital to the startup world, but they also have a pretty good idea of what's likely to work and what's not, and can actually help you make adjustments in your startup careers so that you have a higher probability of being successful. The second thing is we have a concentration of major universities in this part of the world. So if you look at places in the world that have replicated the Silicon Valley, it's often around this intellectual capital that universities produce. So I am really privileged to be in an area where we have three great universities. We have the University of California at Berkeley, which is known as Cal, and Golden Bears is, of course, their team. You have the University of California, San Francisco, of which I am an alum, and UCSF is actually the medical part or the healthcare part of Berkeley campus that broke away in the early 1900s. I think it was around 1903, and became a separate health sciences campus in San Francisco. And there they have medicine, they have dentistry, they have pharmacy, and a whole bunch of allied health sciences. And then, of course, you have Stanford, a university whose name needs no introduction. We have other universities as well in the Bay Area, like Santa Clara University, for example, and a range of community colleges dotted up and down the Bay Area that feed into the larger universities, so to speak. So an area with a lot of intellectual capital that generates high quality students that can then feed industry in and around the Bay Area. The third thing that a Silicon Valley or a Silicon Valley-like locale in another part of the world needs really is out-of-the-box thinking. So I mentioned this a couple of minutes earlier. You really have to be able to think outside the box to take ideas forward in this world, right? So if you keep doing what we have done before, then that's not the definition of progress. There has to be a certain level of discomfort, a certain level of dissatisfaction to go on to the next idea, to go on to the next step. There is an old saying, the reasonable man adjusts himself to the world around him, whereas the unreasonable man tries to adjust the world to himself. All progress, therefore, depends on the unreasonable man, right? So we have to be prepared to step outside the box, to think outside the box, to formulate these new ideas. Like Harish did in the previous lecture, I'm going to try to give you examples as I go along. So the first example I'm going to give you of this out-of-the-box thinking is a company that's probably very well known to all of you, a company called Amazon. Now, you may like Amazon, you may not like Amazon, but the example is worth thinking about. Now, Amazon, when it was started by Jeff Bezos in the early 90s, was, he was sitting around thinking about various concepts, and he thought, I'm going to do an online store, and I'm going to focus it on either computer products, CDs, or books. And he settled on books. So the first concept of Amazon was as an online bookstore. And that concept chugged along. He did rather well in the early days with this concept of an online bookstore. And then he realized a few years down the road that what he had was a really, really good delivery system. So if he was delivering books to your door, why not start delivering other things? So that's where the out-of-the-box thinking came in. And today, almost 30 years later, we know Amazon as the most efficient, the most competent, the most widely the most widespread delivery company in the world. They've introduced now drones in states of the US that permit drone delivery. They've really jumped on the technology bandwagon. There are so many different tech aspects to Amazon that are pretty groundbreaking. So from the concept of an online bookstore that was really a competitor to, say, Barnes & Noble, which is one of the big bookstores in the US, they turned into this online delivery company, and the rest is history. To continue on the concept of out-of-the-box thinking, always good to take an example from Hollywood, because who doesn't know Hollywood, right? Sitting anywhere around the world. I'd like to use one particular example that I really like to talk about. Both of my sons live and work in Hollywood, so I'm close to this part of the world in more ways than one. And I'd like to talk about a movie called Paranormal Activity. I don't know how many of you know this movie. It's about, I don't know, between 10 and 15 years old, and was really a concept of an Israeli film director called Oren Peli. And Oren didn't have much money. He had $15,000 donated by friends and family. How do you make a movie with $15,000? The average budget of a small movie is somewhere between 2 and 5 million. The budget for a big budget movie, like one of those movies that have a lot of technology in it, can be 70 to 100 million US dollars, right? He had 15,000 US dollars. So what he did was he made this ghost story, essentially Paranormal Activity, on this very small budget. Ghosts were essentially, sheets, bed sheets, right? That were dragged along by pieces of string. And he advertised on university campuses. So he had a ready-made audience on university campuses prepared to watch this low-budget horror film. And slowly the film started to get a reputation. Long story short, the movie actually made $130 million in the US, an additional $70 million outside the US. So on $15,000 in capital, he generated 200 million US dollars. And then he sold the rights to Paramount and Steven Spielberg for a huge sum of money. So it's a huge success story. And his out-of-the-box thinking was, I can make a low-budget movie with household objects, advertise it on university campuses, get the attention of the big Hollywood studios, and sell my product to them. So it is one of the unicorns of Hollywood, really. It's a film model that people talk about. There are now 7 Paranormal Activity movies that followed on, 6 that followed on from the original. And it's a new model in Hollywood, this kind of startup model where, just like in Silicon Valley, you can make a low budget movie and then you can get, larger studios. And now we have, of course, Amazon and Hulu and Netflix and all these other players in the movie industry, not just the big Hollywood studios. So it's sort of Hollywood following on from a Silicon Valley model. And we see all these startups there that beget success over time. Another concept that Silicon Valley has is really a requirement in the Silicon Valley mindset is you have to recognize an unmet need. My area is the field of medicine, of course, and most specifically cardiology. We often tell the young entrepreneurs, you may be interested in something, you may be good at doing something, but really when you do your research, you should ask yourself, let's say you're interested in pulmonary medicine. What are the unmet needs in pulmonary medicine? Is there a need for a medical device in the treatment of bronchial asthma? Is there a medical device that can treat emphysema better than what we have today? So in other words, you have to think, okay, we have all these treatments, but what are the gaps in treatment? And that's where you come in with your unmet need. So I'm going to talk to you about a company called eValve, which developed a device called Microkey. It's a company that I've known about for many years, from about the 2008 timeframe. And this was based on a concept that a Stanford cardiologist came up with. His name is Frederickson Gore. And he asked the question, in order to fix a leaky mitral valve, and this is one of the valves of our heart, you have to go in with surgery and you have to operate. So the patient is put under anesthesia, the chest wall is cut, and then you operate on the valve and you repair or replace the valve. And he asked the question, can we do this without an operation? So we had, by this time, a 20, 25, 30-year history of treating coronary artery disease without an operation. You have coronary artery bypass surgery, but we can also open up with angioplasty and stents, right? So he started to think, can we actually fix a valve without opening the chest, without doing this kind of open chest surgery? And he actually came across an Italian surgeon called Dr. Alfieri, who was doing this by putting a stitch in the middle of the leaky valve. So what you see on the screen here is the valve, and you see in the center of the valve, Dr. Alfieri has applied a stitch. So you reduce the leak across this valve by essentially converting it into a figure-of-8 appearance, and this is known as the Alfieri stitch. It wasn't that popular among the surgeons, but it did reduce the mitral valve leak. So Dr. Senghor said, can we do this without surgery? And he developed what's known as the Mitral Clip. So this is essentially a clip that can be introduced without surgery through the groin. You push up the catheters through the groin, you go across the atrial septum, which is that wall separating the two atria in the heart, and then you can implant this clip from, you go across the valve, you implant the clip from just below the valve, you grasp the leaflets, and then you place the clip, and you convert the mitral valve into an appearance that looks not unlike the Alfieri stitch. This was then tested in clinical trials, some successful clinical trials, and in the year 2009, Abbott actually acquired this company. I can disclose the amount because it's in the public domain, for $410 million US, right? So a concept that was basically Dr. Senghor and a very smart engineering colleague called Dr. Farrellan Powell, who sadly is no more, they sat down at the table, came up with this concept, how to design a device that would do what the Alfieri stitch did. That's the story of Mitral Clip, became a very successful acquisition for Abbott, and is now the recognized way of treating a leaky valve without surgery. Has done very well in a number of different settings of leaky mitral valves, and has really revolutionized the space. To cut a long story short, he recognized an unmet medical need. He worked with a brilliant engineer, developed the concept, started human clinical trials, and then ended up being acquired by a medical device giant, namely Abbott. Now, the Silicon Valley is a place where people come from around the world. So, we have, obviously, we have people from India, we have people from China, Taiwan, across Latin America. We have people who come in from Africa, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth. So it's a melting pot of various cultures. And this has been a huge advantage for the Bay Area because, the IT industry was a bit ahead of us and was diverse from the very beginning by definition. Medicine is very diverse because the US has been importing doctors really from the 60s into this country. And now slowly the biotech and the pharmaceutical industry are catching up because we hire from the population in the Bay Area, which is a diverse population. Now, diversity doesn't just mean people with different national backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, people who speak different languages. Diversity also means diversity of thought, right? The way we are taught in India is different from the way they're taught in China. That's different from the way people are taught in the UK. That's different from the way people are taught in the US, different from the way people are taught in Latin America. So you sit around the table with people who've come from these different cultures, with these different backgrounds and different ways of thinking. You end up with a beautiful melting pot that adds to the diversity of thought. So, for example, if you have a new product concept and you have people who think about it from so many different angles because they've been trained in so many different ways, then you have the advantage that that product is going to be looked at in a very critical fashion by this group of individuals. You might say that in India, we are well educated, or at least I was in medical school with a lot of textbook knowledge and obviously a lot of practical knowledge, right? So we had both skills. Whereas in the United States, people do research pretty early and so are used to thinking about problems and projects from a research angle. What is the unanswered question here? How do I take it to the next step? So when you have these groups of people with diverse training together, you can see that each one brings his or her expertise to the table. And while a new idea might come from one part of the table, the ability to take it to the next step might come from a different part of the table. And I see it in the rooms that I'm in all the time. When you're running a project together, you see different skills, not to stereotype people from different countries, but you see different skills that are natural to people with different backgrounds. And the Silicon Valley has done a very good job at actually gelling these diverse backgrounds together to foster innovation and create wonderful new products. Now, this has reached the very highest level of our society in the US. There are Indian Americans and Americans of international descent in very prominent positions. I will show you a few names that are probably the most famous, but this is by no means a complete list. We have Sundar Pichai leading Google. We have Satya Nadella leading Microsoft. We have Shantanu Narayan leading Adobe. We have Ajay Singh Banga leading MasterCard. And you can see how they've taken their companies, ahead, right? Look at the firm's valuations when they took over at various points in time, and look at the valuation as of early last year. I didn't update the slide. I'm sure it's even more. Although COVID, probably put a little bit damper on a few of these companies. But you can see that all of them have taken their companies to much greater heights than when they took over. They were already doing well, of course, when they took over, but they've taken them even to greater heights. The latest member of the club is Arvind Krishna, who is the newly appointed CEO of one of the world's oldest companies, IBM. He joined about a year ago, and so this story continues. And like I said, this is not a complete list. We have some examples in the medical device sector. We have some examples in the pharma sector. For example, the CEO of Novartis is of Indian origin. So, there are many of these examples. And since I'm speaking to an Indian audience, I'm quoting to you the Indian CEOs in the club. But suffice it to say that we have people of international descent at the head of so many of these companies. For example, the head of Pfizer is a Greek American. Some of you might have heard him recently because he was in the news with the Pfizer vaccine. He was traveling to the UK with President Joe Biden, and he has a distinctly Greek accent. That is not at all unusual at the higher echelons of US industry. And I believe that this is diversity ascending to the top. About 20, 30 years ago, a lot of people complained about the glass ceiling. You got to a certain middle management level in these companies and you couldn't rise any further. That changed very quickly in the IT sector and is slowly changing now in the biotech sector and the pharmaceutical sector as well. And I believe that, this is a good thing. This is the US industry recognizing that they need diversity at the very top. These conversations in the last year or so have become quite intense because after the George Floyd incident that many of you know about, the question was being asked, do we really have racial equality in this country? And the question was being asked in academia and industry as well. So it's being approached from several different angles, and we are continuing to see changes. The US has made a lot of mistakes in its history, right? We had land stolen from Native Americans. We have the sin of slavery, so to speak. But it's also a country that learns from its mistakes. And having lived here for 30 years now, you can criticize it, but you can also be appreciative of the fact that it learns from its mistakes and has the ability to reinvent itself, so to speak. And I think, 5 major companies having Indian American CEOs is an example of, the country putting its best foot forward, in a very special way that's near and dear to our hearts. Now, this is a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people who visit the Silicon Valley and learn about it. We have a very high tolerance to failure, right? So it may surprise some of you to know that 90% of startups fail. That means that only 1 in 10 startups will succeed. So what do all these failed startups around the Silicon Valley, what have they actually contributed? Well, they've contributed a great deal of learning. I started my industry career after academia. I started my industry career in startups. And in startups, you make mistakes and you're forgiven for those mistakes because you learn from those mistakes and go ahead. So in fact, if you come out of a failed startup, you wear that as a badge of honor because you know what doesn't work and you can do it right. Maybe the next time, maybe not, maybe the third time, maybe not. But eventually the hope is that you will succeed, right? So there's a high tolerance to failure, and we don't penalize failure. And I think societies like, for example, Singapore, right? Singapore is a society that's progressed a great deal and has really turned itself around from a small fishing village, a fishing outpost in the late 60s. Lee Kuan Yew did a magnificent job of turning it around. But when I talk to students in Singapore about this tolerance to failure, it surprises them, right? Because we are not used to failure as young, bright students, right? This is not something that's in our DNA, but it becomes part of your DNA when you're in the startup world, and there's a very good reason for it. Harish mentioned Elon Musk. I think he's a good example of this. I mean, he's such a brilliant entrepreneur in so many different ways. You think of PayPal, you think of Tesla, you think of SpaceX, you think of Solar City, but this man has had a string of failures in his life, and every time he's emerged from them, learning from them and turning it into a success. He unsuccessfully applied for a job at Netscape. He was removed as CEO of his own company, Zip2, in the 80s. His first PayPal product was voted a complete disaster. He has had multiple rocket launch failures. Tesla almost went bankrupt several times. And is now, the leading example of a completely electric car company, taking the fight to the big three auto manufacturers. SpaceX almost went bankrupt many times, had failures in space. He was removed as CEO of PayPal while enjoying his honeymoon. And this man is, a hallmark of success in the US industry because he's learned from his failures. He's turned things around. Tesla has had its challenges, but if you drive up and down 101 or 280 in the Silicon Valley, it's full of Teslas. It's one of the most popular cars in this part of the world. And the Tesla image has spread globally. And one day SpaceX and companies like SpaceX are going to, take over from NASA, right? As the way of traveling the space as it all enters the private sector. In fact, NASA borrows rockets from the private sector now to launch satellites and put them in space and so on. Now, we have a saying in the Silicon Valley, fail fast so that you can eventually succeed big. And I have an example from my own company, my own sector. We launched a stent called Xience in the 2006 to 2008 timeframe. And it's the #1 drug-eluting stent worldwide. So if you have if you're a cardiac patient and you have a stent anywhere in the world, you actually have the market share is about 40%, which means you have a 40% chance of having Xience implanted in you. But Xience was not our first effort. Actually, we failed 2 or 3 times, maybe even 4 times before we launched Xience. And in fact, when Xience hit the market in the US, it was not the first, it was not the second, it was not the third, it was the 4th drug-eluting stent. So we were not first to market, but we learned from our own mistakes. We learned from the mistakes of others in the field. And when we eventually launched, we were able to steal a march on the market, and we were able to establish ourselves as the most widespread or the most widely used drug-eluting stent. We've had several generations since then: Xience V, Xience Prime, Xience Expedition, Alpine, Sierra, and this year we're launching Skype. You can see some figures here: 15 million implants. This is not trivial. We've done over 120 clinical trials. We've studied over 125,000 patients in these clinical trials, which is all a testimony to the success step. Another thing that we talk about in Silicon Valley is collective creativity. What does this mean? Collective creativity is very simply the opposite of hierarchy. So, when we think of an average, or most companies, we have the boss, and then we have a lot of employees. I use this example because these are the minions you might recognize from the movies. So that we have the boss and we have his or her minions, right? So this is not a model that's embraced in Silicon Valley. The model that's embraced really is a model that Pixar introduced. Pixar is an Emeryville-based company, just pretty close to Berkeley, almost next door to Berkeley. And Pixar was a company that was really a spin out from Lucasfilms. George Lucas was the guy who created Star Wars, very famous guy, sold his company to Disney for $5 billion. So Pixar was a little spin out from there and, creating these beautiful animated movies. But the culture at Pixar is a culture of collective creativity, which means that every member of the team has an equal say. There's very limited hierarchy. Of course, there are some people at the top who control the finances and the purse strings, but nobody is superior to another member of the team, right? So it's collectively you create, every member of the team has equal rank. Any member of the team can contribute, any member of the team can critique. And as a result of this collective creativity, they've been a mega success. And this company was acquired, as you know, by Disney for about $8 billion by virtue of creating these wonderful movies that are now household names. Many of the movies you see here, these are my favorites, all-time favorites, Toy Story 3 or Coco or Ratatouille, or, you name it, Pixar made it, right? These are wonderful movies that came out of this creative melting pot of ideas where hierarchy was eliminated. Everybody had an equal role. And the result of that collective creativity, and we see it in so many of the Silicon Valley startups. Often these are small startups to begin with, maybe a doctor, an engineer, and a finance guy. Everybody has the same moral authority in the company. Everybody has the same say in the company. And as it grows, to 25, 50, 100 people, you try as much as possible to keep that collective creative. Of course, when you reach a size of 2,000 or 20,000, or in our case at Abbott, over 100,000 employees, that's hard to maintain. But the startup culture demands it, and the startup culture actually benefits from that type of atmosphere. Teamwork is an obvious one, but I think we need to talk about it a little. There is a misconception that innovation is some brilliant guy sitting at or brilliant woman sitting at a desk somewhere, and a light bulb goes off and boom, this idea came up. That's really the exception. The rule is quite the opposite. We talked about collective creativity, and then that's handed over to a team. So it goes down a process map. Everybody has their role. So when we create a new stent, there's the R&D guys who are extremely smart, and it's often not one person who's created the idea. It's multiple people who've contributed to it. That's then passed over the wall to the clinical folks to run the clinical trial. But then you have the regulatory folks, behind the scenes, or talking to the FDA, talking to the European regulators, talking to the Japanese, Chinese, Indian regulators behind the scene, finding out, what it takes to get it approved. You complete the clinical trial, you get it approved, and then you hand it over the fence to marketing and sales, who then take it through and sell the product and take it through to its life cycle. And everybody plays their role in this team. And if somebody drops the ball, then the product's going to suffer and nothing is going to be done. So let's take one example. You take a winner like Serena Williams, right? So many Grand Slams, an example of somebody who transformed women's tennis, and really is one of the greatest tennis players alive. Even if you include people like Bjorn Borg or Mats Wilander or Federer or Djokovic, I think she exceeds all of them in terms of the number of Grand Slam titles she's done. Just dominated the world of tennis for so many years. So you think this is an individual accomplishment? Well, there's actually 40 people on her team. 40 people who travel with her everywhere. We're not just talking about physiotherapists, coaches, nutritionists. We're talking about people who motivate her. We're talking about family members. We're talking about publicists. She has a crew of 40 people that she travels with who make her the success that she is. That's the team that she has. And she talks about it, but very few other people really recognize it. So I think the winners know that they can't do it without the team behind them. And I think that's what we always have to remember. So if I'm in a position, a leadership position in my company, it's because I have a team who works with me, who helps me every day. I learn from them much more than they learn from me. And, the success of an individual leader is really a reflection of the success of his or her team. I learned that 30 years ago, and it's something that stuck with me every day. And it's very, very, very true in an innovative environment. We can't do this without our teams, you know. Without our teams, we really don't exist. I'm coming to the last 2 points. Employee ownership. You know, this is a big thing in Silicon Valley. All of us as employees of our company are also part owners of the company. Whether it's in the early startup environment where you receive stock options, which means they really don't have value until, you know, the company goes public or the company is acquired, in which case it's exchanged for the stock of the acquiring company. Or if you're an established company, you might get RSAs or RSUs, which are restricted stock units where, you know, they actually have value, right? So this is in addition to salary and bonuses, we get these stock options or stock, which means that we are actually a part of the ownership of the company. And I can tell you that this is something that really makes people contribute, work long hours, work very hard for the company because you're part of the success. Imagine if you are coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 9 o'clock at night, and you just get your fixed salary, but the boss makes all the money, right? That's a model for envy. That's a model for jealousy. That's a model for, you know, resigning and moving on to a competitor who might pay you a little bit more, right? The reason that we have such a high retention in our companies is everybody feels a part of the process. And, you know, it's you know, you as somebody once said, you can't live on love alone, right? You also need to be financially compensated. And I think the Silicon Valley has learned to do this very well in the startup environment, as well as in the medium-sized and large company environment. Maybe this is obvious to people in industry, but it wasn't obvious to me when I entered the Silicon Valley that this was such an important part of its success. And finally, something that nobody talks much about is a play of chance. You see, we hear about the unicorns, right? We hear about the companies like WhatsApp that were acquired for 18.5 billion. But what about all the others that were not acquired? We hear about Google, but whatever happened to Alta Vista? Not very much, right? I mean, there were search engines before Google, but they kind of disappeared. So there is an element of chance. Obviously, you have to have a good product, but you have to have that element of chance. And if you can, along the way, recognize what makes these companies lucky and in the end get acquired, then you're ahead of the game. And a lot of the very smart VCs I've talked to have learned to recognize that. So you have to have a good product, you have to have a good CEO, you have to have a good team. But if you don't have that element of chance, you may not get anywhere. Now, Bruce Springsteen said it, you know, when it comes to luck, you can make your own. So maybe that's an approach to getting luck on your side. But my favorite is actually Thomas Jefferson's interpretation. I'm a great believer in luck, and I find that the harder I work, the more of it I have. So maybe it's not all Dame luck. Maybe there's, you know, your own individual contribution to it. Maybe there's the contribution of the work ethic, the cosmos in which you live in creating some of that luck and so on. You know, good fortune begets good fortune and, you know, makes companies successful. We've seen that in medicine too. We've seen really good products not make it through, and we've seen kind of okay products make it through and then become good products later on. And when you step back and ask, you know, what actually made company X lucky, but company Y not so lucky, it's probably a little more than just luck alone. It's probably that, you know, conceptually they thought this better than the competitor had that did not succeed. So that's my last slide. And I'm going to end by saying thank you and good luck to all of you, because we all need it. Back to you, Nilay.
Thank you, Dr. Sudheesh, for unpacking ideas about the intersectional interaction between industries from an expert point of view, and for your profound insights on the concept of thought itself. On this occasion, we would like to kick off the Khoj exhibitions. Khoj is a university initiative in collaboration with Atapi Seva Foundation to nurture social connect and social responsibility among students. The students work in interdisciplinary teams to address social challenges, problems, and issues through innovation. The Khoj projects undertaken are in the areas of health, livelihood, women empowerment, persons with disabilities, and education of the marginalized. With your permission, Chief Guest Mr. Harish Mehta Guest of honor, Dr. Krishna Sudheesh, and CEO of Atapi Foundation, Dr. Nandini Srivastav, we declare the Khoj exhibition open. We invite all of you to join us now on a virtual tour of the projects. This virtual exhibition was largely bolstered by the efforts of Professor Manali, Shubhanshu, and Srividya. I would like to thank them for making this possible. Adult education models for basic digital and financial literacy of rural women, teacher skill development and volunteer system for STEM education were some projects in the area of education. In the area of women empowerment, projects involved the development of business models for terracotta pottery, paper bags, cloth bags and masks, and products like mosquito repellent, soap, and pots made from natural resources. In the health category, projects like rapid needs assessments of health facilities and diagnostic facilities, designing and implementing behavior change campaigns during the COVID-19 pandemic, making a software for panchayats for COVID management, and helping with telemedicine programs was some of the work done by our students. Ventures to help people with disabilities included assessing the spatial designs of accessible toilets, creating a database with affordable materials of accessible toilets, developing business models for income generation, and developing an online system of special education for children. These are just a few examples of the projects undertaken by the students. There were 11 major projects in the autumn semester and 12 major projects in the spring semester, under which many minor initiatives were also undertaken. You can have a detailed look at these projects by clicking on the link shared on Zoom chat as well as the YouTube live chat. Thank you. I now invite Dr. Mandira Sikdar to deliver a formal vote of thanks.
Honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on the occasion of the 12th Foundation Day celebration of Navratna University. An event of such magnitude calls for collective wisdom and efforts. Allow me to begin by thanking the chief guest of the ceremony, Mr. Harish Mehta, founder and executive chairman of Onward Technologies Limited. Guest of honor, Dr. Krishna Sudheesh, cardiologist, vice president at Abbott Vascular, California, USA, for their gracious acceptance of our invitation. Thank you for your very insightful and inspiring address. Our gratitude to President Navratna University, Shri Rahul Amin, Chairperson Navratna Education Society, Srimati Tejal Amin, Provost Dr. Nilay Yagnik, members of the Board of Governors and Board of Management, members of the Academic Council, Registrar Dr. Sandeep Basant. Our gratitude for your guiding vision and inspiration. We thank Dr. Nandini Srivastava, CEO, Atapi Seva Foundation. The Khoj Initiative for University Community Connect and Social Innovation is implemented on the basis of collaboration between Navratna University and Atapi Seva Foundation. We also take this opportunity to extend our most sincere thanks to all our esteemed guests, faculty, staff, students, and alumni. Our sincere thanks to all who have supported us behind the scenes. Thank you all. Have a nice day ahead.
Over to you, Devanshu.
Thank you, ma'am. For a formal closure of the ceremony, I now request you all to rise for the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Harish Bhai, Sudhir. Thank you, Maulik Bhai, for attending today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nilesh Bhai. I can see you also. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the faculty, all the staff. Thank you to the entire Foundation Day team, led by Dr. Vandana, Dr. Mandira, and of course, Devanshu. Thank you so much for some excellent comparing. And thank you, Chairperson Tejalben, and thank you, Sandhya-ben, and everybody watching today. Thank you.